Hello and welcome to True Crime Rocket Science, the most authentic voice in true crime. Murdaugh's white shirt mystery. Why won't that shirt be used as evidence? It's vital evidence, so why is it not going to be used? Well, it won't be used because it can't be, because it's been destroyed by successive tests and holes cut out of the fabric. It's a lot like the Ramsey ransom note. Such an important piece of evidence and then ultimately destroyed because of evidence testing. This was one of the last photos taken of the shirt before its untimely demise. But this earlier image does seem to show a reddish substance near to the bottom of Murdaugh's shirt. Due to Murdaugh's sitting position in the first police interview inside the cruiser, can you see it's difficult to make out any spatter or whether his shirt is tucked in? To the naked eye, there doesn't seem to be anything on his shirt, lower down or higher up. And isn't that a clue? Interestingly, both the defense and prosecution acknowledged the likely presence of blood on the shirt. What do you think? Do you think there was blood on the shirt? Because that's a very important argument if you're going to take it into the legal, make a legal argument out of that. Is it a fact that there's blood on the shirt, or do you simply believe that there's blood on the shirt? What does the evidence say? Before we get to that, if you haven't subscribed to the channel, please do. I will be doing a much deeper dive going into the timeline of the Murdaugh case, really going into the rabbit hole of this case into a lot more detail. So look out for that following this episode. If you're enjoying this episode, please like, share, leave a comment. You can also hit the thanks button, and let's get started. So the defense and prosecution, as I say, both presented arguments for why there is or may be blood traces present on the shirt. And I think it's really interesting that the defense need to prove blood on his shirt as well. Quite ironic. In terms of law and crimes coverage, they provided the following assessment of the defense case. And this is quoting from that website. I'll put a link in the description. Quote, "The defense argues that any blood present is only on the bottom third and was transferred there when Murdaugh touched the bodies of his wife and son after he found them and frantically checked them for signs of life." That's according to a defense motion filed last year in November. Now let's deal with the prosecution case. Prosecutors say the front of the shirt is over 100 high-velocity blood spatter stains that likely occurred from the shotgun blast that killed Paul Murdaugh, right? So it's from that. It's really just from the shotgun. And that is a conclusion based on the analysis of Tom Bevel, a former Oklahoma police officer who runs and operates a self-described forensic education and consulting company, end quote. In other words, he's a fairly obscure person, right? It's not from FBI analysis or something like that. Now, I've got to say, I disagree with both of them. I disagree with the defense explanation, and I disagree with the prosecution's case. I agree with the defense that if there is blood present, it might be from a transfer, right? Not from actual blood spattered when the crime was actually committed. But I think that the transfer was perhaps when Murdaugh was changing clothes. Now, I agree with the prosecution that you'd expect to see high-velocity blood spatter stains at a point-blank type execution like that. But I don't agree with them that they are present. The prosecution failed to do a search of Murdaugh's home that night, so the 7th of June going into the 8th of June, and incredibly failed to do a search for the next 2 months. That just shows to what extent they held him in high regard and respected what he said and took what he said at face value and accepted what he said. Now, even though they applied for a search warrant, I think it was the next day, the authorities actually sat on it and only executed it sometime in September. Only then was the bottom falling out of the Murdaugh fairy tale. Only then was his goose starting to be cooked in other areas as well. Only then was he sort of kicked out of his own law firm. So had they done a search warrant there and then, I wager that they would have found clothing in the washing machine, which is what the situation you had in the Amanda Knox case, and you also had apparently evidence coming out of the washing machine in the Morphew home. There's also a washing machine in the Scott Peterson case, right? Now, an hour is about as much time as a washing machine needs to complete a full cycle. And that's about how long Murdaugh took to call 911. Also, a white shirt seems to be screaming, "Look, I'm white. Look, I'm sparkly clean." A few days ago, Law and Crime posted images of the crime scene schematic showing Maggie, where Maggie was lying in relation to Paul. Well, whoever killed them knew it was important to kill Paul first. Done the other way round, the killer may have had a real fight on his hands. He may have had one of the victims running away, right? So if one imagines Maggie being shot second with a weapon that was never found, you do know that a different weapon was used on Paul and Maggie was shot second. Well, the weapon used on Maggie was never found. So one can actually imagine the killer, after shooting Maggie, leaving the area quite quickly, perhaps running and perhaps also driving directly home immediately after. Well, what else was he doing? Didn't he exit the scene with what he had in his hand? Well, what did he have in his hand? Well, wasn't it the automatic rifle? So we know there was an automatic rifle matching the cartridges around Maggie's body, a rifle we know Murdaugh bought but has never been accounted for. Wasn't that also taken to the house? And perhaps wasn't that cleaned as well, or hidden or tossed into a nearby lake? In any event, I think the defense and prosecution are at cross purposes regarding the shirt. In fact, they tried so hard to find blood evidence that I doubt was there to begin with, they ended up destroying the shirt. The better legal argument isn't to try to argue where the blood came from or how it came to be there, but rather that there seemed to be an obvious absence of blood evidence, absent to the naked eye, absent to casual observation, absent to the camera recording the first interview on the night of the incident. Both the defense and prosecution accept that there should have been blood, and even the suspect's own version presupposes touching the victims. So why wasn't there any? So an argument that trumps both the defense and prosecution's case is, why wasn't there any blood? There's something suspicious about that. There's something suspicious about the absence of evidence. And that is a much tougher legal hurdle to deal with, wouldn't you say? So that is how I would have handled that aspect in a jury trial setting. We are going to continue talking about this idea of a shirt, dealing with the Alec Baldwin case, where we will look at the shirt Elena Hutchins wore, and have any of you seen that shirt? And then we're also going to continue the timeline, dealing with the narrative of the Murdaugh case, going down all those rabbit holes. And then I'm also going to do a video dealing with the Idaho case. So all of that is coming up later today. Thank you for listening, and I'll see you guys next time.